Support the channel by liking and subscribing. It helps me tell more touching stories. They called it giving up. Said I threw away my future for a pipe dream. They stopped mentioning my name in Christmas cards. Started telling people I was figuring things out. But success was never about the noise. It was about the work no one saw. The failures that taught me everything. The quiet persistence that builds empires. If you believe in taking the unconventional path, in stories where the underdog writes their own ending, subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes the biggest victories come wrapped in the smallest moments. My name is Maya Chen. I'm 26 years old. I live in a converted warehouse in Austin, Texas. I make my own hours. I answer to no one. And according to my family, I'm still the college dropout who ruined her life. I was 3 semesters into a computer science degree at UT when I walked away, not because of parties or grades or some dramatic breakdown, because I'd built something in my dorm room that kept me awake at night, not from stress, but from possibility. A simple app that helped students split bills and track shared expenses. My roommate Jake used it, then his girlfriend, then half the floor. Within 2 weeks, I had 300 users I'd never met asking for new features. When I told my parents I was leaving school to work on it full-time, my father set down his chopsticks and stared at me like I'd announced I was joining a cult. "You're throwing away a degree for a calculator app," he said. My mother just shook her head, the way she did when the neighbor's dog got into our trash again. Disappointed but not surprised. "Finish school first," she said. "Then play with your little projects." But I couldn't wait. The app was growing 20% week over week. Users were messaging me at 2 a.m. with feature requests. I was getting emails from other schools asking when we'd expand. The math was simple. I could spend 2 more years learning theory, or I could spend those years building something that actually mattered. I chose to build. The first year was brutal. I moved into a studio apartment that smelled like ramen and regret, lived on $800 a month, coded 14 hours a day. My parents called exactly twice, once to ask if I'd reconsidered school, once to invite me to my cousin David's medical school graduation party. "We're so proud of David," my mom said on the phone. "He's going to be a real doctor, not like these internet doctors you see everywhere." I didn't mention that Split Easy had just hit 50,000 users. At David's party, I sat in the corner while everyone celebrated the golden child. My Aunt Carol made a point of introducing him to everyone as our family's first doctor. When she got to me, she paused. "And this is Marcus. He's taking a break from school." I smiled politely, ate cake, said nothing. Because that's what disappointments do. We stay quiet. We stay small. We let others write our story while we're busy writing code that will change everything. But I was building something they couldn't see yet. Split Easy had evolved beyond bill splitting. We'd added group savings goals, shared wish lists, even a marketplace where students could buy and sell textbooks directly through the app. By year 2, we had 200,000 active users across 150 colleges. The revenue was starting to flow. Small at first, transaction fees, premium features, sponsored content from brands targeting college students. But consistent, growing, real. I hired my first employee, Sarah, a brilliant designer who'd dropped out of art school to freelance. Then Jake, a back-end developer who'd left his corporate job because he believed in what we were building. We worked out of coffee shops in my apartment until we could afford a tiny office space above a taco shop. My family still thought I was playing video games all day. At my grandmother's 80th birthday party, my Uncle Tom cornered me by the punch bowl. "So when are you going back to school?" he asked. "Can't live off your parents forever." I wasn't living off my parents. I was paying my own rent, my own groceries, my own health insurance. But explaining that would have required them to ask real questions about what I actually did all day. "Still figuring it out," I said, because it was easier than the truth. Year 3 changed everything. We caught the attention of venture capitalists, not because we were looking for funding, but because our growth metrics were impossible to ignore. A partner at Kleiner Perkins reached out after seeing our user retention numbers. 87% monthly active users, 4.2 App Store rating across 50,000 reviews, $2.3 million in annual recurring revenue. The term sheet was surreal. $8 million Series A for 25% of the company. Suddenly, SplitEasy wasn't just an app. It was a business. A real, legitimate, growing business that investors believed could become something massive. I used the funding to hire a proper team. Moved into a real office with whiteboards and standing desks and a coffee machine that cost more than my first car. We expanded beyond college campuses into corporate expense management, family financial planning, small business accounting. The growth was exponential. Month over month, users poured in. Fortune 500 companies started using our B2B platform. Tech blogs wrote features about us. Industry analysts added us to their companies to watch lists. But at home, I was still the college dropout. My cousin David finished his residency and got engaged to another doctor. The family group chat exploded with congratulations. Photos of the ring, plans for the wedding, talk of their bright future together. I'd just closed a $25 million Series B round. Nobody asked. The breaking point came at my father's retirement party. He'd worked 35 years as an accountant, steady and reliable and proud of his pension. The whole family gathered to celebrate his achievements. During his speech, he looked around the room and said, "I'm proud of all my children and their accomplishments. David's becoming a doctor. My daughter Lisa just made partner at her law firm. And Marcus, well, Marcus is still young. He'll figure it out eventually." The room chuckled politely. I smiled and raised my glass like a good son should. That night, I sat in my car outside their house for 20 minutes, watching the warm light through the windows. Inside, they were probably cleaning up, talking about David's wedding plans, Lisa's latest case, Dad's retirement hobbies, normal family things. I pulled out my phone and looked at the email I'd received that afternoon. Subject line, acquisition offer, confidential. TechCorp, a Fortune 100 company, wanted to acquire SplitEasy. The number at the bottom made my hands shake. $47 million. For something I'd built in my dorm room, something they'd called a pipe dream. I didn't respond to the email that night. I went home and worked on code until sunrise, because that's what I did when the world felt too big and too small at the same time. 3 weeks later, after legal reviews and negotiation calls and sleepless nights weighing the decision, I said yes, not to the first offer, to the final one, $52 million, cash and stock, with performance bonuses that could push it higher. After taxes and investor payouts and employee equity, my share was $12.3 million. I was 26 years old. I'd built a company from nothing, sold it for more money than my family had made in their entire careers combined. And they still thought I was unemployed. The acquisition wouldn't be public for another month. Press releases, interviews, industry coverage, all of that would come later. For now, it was just a number in a bank account and a signature on a contract that changed everything. Thanksgiving was 2 weeks away. I almost didn't go. The thought of sitting through another dinner where I was the family disappointment felt unbearable. But something about the timing felt right. Poetic, maybe, or just necessary. I bought a bottle of good wine, not to celebrate, just to contribute like a proper guest should. The house smelled like turkey and disappointment, the same as every year. My parents had invited the usual crowd, my sister Lisa and her husband, cousin David and his fiancée, Uncle Tom and Aunt Carol, a few family friends who'd known me since I was small. I arrived exactly on time. I always do. "Maya," my mom said, hugging me at the door. "I'm so glad you could make it. How's the job search going?" "Still looking," I said, because the truth wasn't ready yet. Dinner conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. David talked about his new position at the hospital. Lisa shared updates from her law firm. Uncle Tom told stories about his latest golf games. I nodded along, invisible again. Then came the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. Uncle Tom, 3 beers deep and feeling conversational, turned to me with that familiar look in his eyes, the one that said he was about to offer unsolicited life advice. "So, Maya," he said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "still unemployed?" The table went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of people focusing on their food, but the awkward quiet of people watching a car accident in slow motion. My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. My father cleared his throat. David looked down at his plate. Lisa shot Tom a warning look that he completely missed. I took a sip of water, set the glass down carefully, looked around the table at these people who'd known me my entire life but had never bothered to ask what I actually did with my days. Then I smiled. Not the polite smile I'd worn for years, the kind that reaches your spine, the kind that says everything is about to change. "Actually," I said, voice calm and clear, "I just sold my startup for $12 million. The silence that followed was different, heavier, charged with the electricity of everything shifting at once. Uncle Tom blinked. "What?" "My company, Split Easy. We just closed an acquisition deal with TechCorp. $12 million. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. My father sat back in his chair like he'd been pushed. David looked up, eyes wide. Lisa's mouth fell open. You're serious?" My mom whispered. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. Opened the banking app. Turned the screen toward the table. The number was right there in black and white. Account balance with more zeros than any of them had ever seen in one place. "Holy shit," David breathed, then immediately looked apologetic. "Sorry, Grandma." Grandma waved him off. She was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Uncle Tom cleared his throat. I had no idea you were running a business. You never asked," I said simply. And that was the truth that hung in the air like smoke from birthday candles. For 3 years, they'd written me off as the family failure, the college dropout who couldn't get his life together. Not once had anyone asked what I was actually working on. My mother started crying. Not sad tears, but something more complicated. Relief, maybe, or shame, or pride that was 3 years too late. "Why didn't you tell us?" she said. I shrugged. "I tried. Remember when I wanted to show you the app sophomore year? You said to focus on my studies instead." The room stayed quiet while that sank in. My father, ever the accountant, was the first to recover. 12 million, that's after taxes. Before taxes. After everything, it's about 8 million in my pocket, plus stock options that could be worth more if the company hits certain milestones. David leaned forward. "What kind of company? What does it do?" So I told them about Split Easy, about the 800,000 users across 300 colleges, about the B2B platform that helped companies manage expenses, about the team of 23 people I'd hired, about the office space and the growth metrics and the acquisition offers I'd turned down before accepting this one. I told them about Sarah, who designed our user interface so intuitively that my grandmother could probably use it. About Jake, who'd built back-end systems that could handle millions of transactions without breaking. About the corporate clients who saved thousands of dollars a month using our platform. I told them about the nights I'd worked until sunrise, not because I had to, but because I believed in what we were building. About the users who sent thank you emails, saying our app had helped them manage their finances through college. About the small businesses that grew faster because our tools made their accounting simpler. I told them about building something from nothing, about taking an idea that everyone dismissed and turning it into something that mattered. When I finished, the turkey was cold, and the wine was gone, and the sun was setting outside the dining room windows. Aunt Carol spoke first. "I owe you an apology. We all do." Uncle Tom nodded, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "I'm sorry, Maya. I should have asked more questions instead of making assumptions." My mother reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm so proud of you. I should have said that 3 years ago." My father, who'd spent decades believing that security came from steady paychecks and benefits packages, looked at me with something like wonder. "You built this yourself?" "With a great team. But yeah, I started it in my dorm room." He shook his head slowly. I don't understand most of what you just said about apps and platforms, but $12 million. That's real success. The conversation that followed was different than any we'd ever had. They asked questions, real questions, about the technology, the business model, the acquisition process, about what I planned to do next. I told them about the non-compete clause that meant I couldn't start another company in the same space for 2 years, about the consulting opportunities I was considering, about maybe going back to school, but this time for an MBA, to learn the business side of technology. You could teach the professors, Lisa said, and everyone laughed. As the evening wound down and people started clearing dishes, David pulled me aside. I need to ask you something, he said. All those family events where I didn't really include you. I thought you were just messing around with computers. I'm sorry. I nodded. It's okay. I get why you thought that. No, it's not okay. You were building something incredible, and we were too busy judging to notice. He paused. Can I ask you for advice? About investing? I've got some money saved, and I have no idea what to do with it. The cousin who'd been the golden child for my entire life was asking me for financial advice. I'd be happy to help, I said. That night, I drove home through Austin's quiet streets with the windows down and the radio off. The city looked different somehow. Not because anything had changed, but because I was seeing it with new eyes. My phone buzzed with texts from family members, photos from dinner, apologies, questions about the business, invitations to get coffee and talk more. 3 years of silence, broken by one number. But the strange thing was, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt settled, like a puzzle piece had finally clicked into place. The next morning, I woke up to an email from a journalist at TechCrunch. The acquisition had leaked early. By noon, the story was everywhere. College Dropout sells app for $52 million. The dorm room startup that became a Fortune 500 acquisition. How one young entrepreneur turned bill splitting into big business. My phone rang constantly. Interview requests, speaking opportunities, investment offers for my next venture. My mother called around 2 p.m., voice breathless with excitement. Maya, there's an article about you in the newspaper, with your picture and everything. It says you're one of Austin's top young entrepreneurs. Yeah, I saw it, I said. I'm framing it, she said. I'm framing all of them. That evening I met Sarah and the rest of my team at our favorite bar to celebrate. Not just the acquisition, but everything we'd built together. The late nights, the breakthrough moments, the users whose lives we'd made a little bit easier. So what's next for the great Maya Chen? Sarah asked, raising her beer. I looked around the table at these people who'd believed in the vision when it was just an idea, who'd worked for equity instead of salary because they trusted that we were building something worthwhile. Honestly, I have no idea, I said, and that's exciting. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the dean at UT. The computer science department wanted to offer me a guest lecturing position, to talk to students about entrepreneurship, about taking calculated risks, about building something from nothing. We'd love to have you share your story, she said. Show students that there are multiple paths to success. I accepted immediately, not because I needed the validation, but because I remembered what it felt like to be 20 years old with an idea that everyone dismissed. My first lecture was in the same building where I'd sat as a student, dreaming of creating something that mattered. The auditorium was packed, students, faculty, even some local entrepreneurs who'd heard about the session. I stood at the podium and looked out at 200 faces, most of them younger than I was when I'd made the decision that changed everything. 3 years ago, I began, I sat in one of these seats. I had an idea for an app, and everyone told me it was a waste of time, that I should focus on getting my degree, getting a safe job, following the traditional path. I paused, remembering that moment of choice. But sometimes the traditional path isn't your path. Sometimes you have to build your own road, even when everyone thinks you're walking in the wrong direction. The room was completely silent. I'm not here to tell you to drop out of college. Education is valuable. But I am here to tell you that if you have something burning inside you, something you can't stop thinking about. Don't let anyone talk you out of pursuing it. Not your parents, not your professors, not the voice in your head that says you're not ready. After the lecture, students lined up to ask questions about starting companies, about dealing with family pressure, about finding the courage to bet on yourself when everyone else is betting against you. One student, a sophomore named Katie, stayed after everyone else had left. "I have an idea for an app," she said shyly, "but my parents want me to focus on my pre-med classes. They think it's a distraction." I smiled, remembering my own parents' reaction to Split Easy. "Tell me about your idea," I said. She lit up as she described a platform to help students find and share textbooks. Simple concept, but she'd thought through the user experience, the business model, the technical challenges. "It sounds like you've done your homework," I said. "Have you built a prototype?" She shook her head. "I don't know how to code." Neither did I when I started. I learned as I went. YouTube tutorials, online courses, asking friends for help. I pulled out my business card. "Email me. I'll send you some resources to get started." 3 months later, Katie sent me a demo of her app. It was rough around the edges, but functional, full of potential. 6 months after that, she had 1,000 users at UT. Today, she's running a team of 5 students and has expanded to 3 universities. She's still pre-med, but she's also an entrepreneur. Because sometimes you don't have to choose between the safe path and the uncertain one. Sometimes you can walk both until you know which one leads where you want to go. At this year's Thanksgiving dinner, the conversation was different. Not because they treated me like a celebrity, but because they treated me like family. They asked about my new projects, my investments, my plans for the future. Real questions from people who genuinely wanted to know the answers. Uncle Tom, who'd spent the year reading TechCrunch and learning about startups, cornered me by the appetizer table. "I've been thinking about your story," he said, "about how we all missed what you were doing. It made me realize I don't really know what any of my kids are passionate about. I just know what they do for work." He paused, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to apologize again, and to ask if you'd be willing to talk to my daughter Emma. She's been talking about starting a business, and I was going to tell her to get a real job first. But maybe that's not the right advice." I smiled. "I'd be happy to talk to Emma." After dinner, I stood on my parents' back porch, looking up at the Austin skyline in the distance, the city where I'd built something from nothing, where I'd learned that success isn't always loud or obvious or traditional. My phone buzzed, a text from Katie. "Just closed our first round of funding, $500,000. Thank you for believing in the idea when it was just an idea." I typed back, "Congratulations. Now the real work begins." Then I put the phone away and stood there in the quiet, thinking about paths not taken and roads built from scratch, about families that love you even when they don't understand you, about dreams that seem impossible until suddenly they're not. The air was crisp, laced with barbecue smoke and possibility. Somewhere in the city, another college student was probably sitting in their dorm room with an idea that everyone would call crazy, working late into the night on something that could change everything. I hoped they'd have the courage to build it anyway, because sometimes the best stories are the ones no one sees coming. The quiet victories, the long games, the moments when everything changes with a single sentence at a dinner table. Where are you watching from today? Have you ever had to choose between the safe path and the uncertain one? Drop a comment below and share your story. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone in taking the road less traveled. If this resonated with you, if you believe in building your own path and betting on yourself even when others don't, subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this ahead, and I'd be honored to share them with you. Thank you for being here. Until next time, stay bold, stay building, and remember, your biggest critics often become your biggest supporters once they understand what you were working toward all along.